as I've done some analysis of these early classes, the earliest group of guys, the most prevalent job that most of these guys went into after graduating was teaching or the ministry. There's an inordinate amount of ministers that come out of these early groups. I don't know if they reformed, I don't know if they resisted and didn't do much during these parties, but there's an inordinate amount of ministers. Then there's a lot of doctors, and then of course a lot of lawyers. In the case of Warren Modsey, he went into insurance. Bill Slay, a Phi Nu from the class of 22, went into the law. And you have these gentlemen in the background of all of this going on. In 1930, when the white church was built and the Phi Nus were now landless, they needed property. They went around campus to try and find people who might want to sell property. The first people they approached, and they had drawings done up of it, which are rough drawings, but I have them, were of a proposed fraternity that would stand between Phi Nu and Alpha Theta along the back of the hill that leads down to the parking lot behind the white church and Baker and all of that area, the quadrangle in there. They were going to build a third fraternity wedged in between them. That didn't pass muster. So in 1934, they walk across the street to the Gamma Delta Epsilons, who are, by now, they are part of a national fraternity called Alpha Sigma Phi. They're a local chapter now. Round about the late 20s, they incorporated into a larger chapter. By 1930, they're a member of this national fraternity. And the Phi Nus ask if they can buy the back of the property. Because remember, the Gamma Delta Epsilon property is towards the road. The building runs back to roughly about 2/3 of the way along the porch. But there's the whole backyard of this property that's unused. So they wonder if they can build a house behind that. Now, around this time, I should note, going back to the First World War for a moment, there were two brothers who died in the war. One was Phillips Haskell, class of 14, who was one of the original Gamma Delta Epsilons. The other was Fred Cook Kilpatrick, class of 19, who was Lambda Chi Alpha. But in the wake of the war, there was a terrible influenza epidemic called the Spanish flu. And at this time, when it hit the college campus in 1919, they turned all of the gymnasiums into sick wards. And a number of the students perished. I don't believe we lost any at that point. But it's going back to the 1930s. These guys, the older alums of all these organizations, have been hardened by war. They've been through now the great boom years of the 20s. Their younger fraternity brothers have been having a good time, but they're now coping with the economy in the 1930s. And so the Phi Nus have money in their account. They approach Gamma Delta Epsilon. Times are tough, and they propose to buy the back end of the house property. And thankfully, the Gamma Delta said, wait a minute, we have a better idea. And at this time in 1934, President Hopkins had commissioned a study on how to